Golf. This is Rory fever, is this? It was, for sure. Afternoon, everybody. Firstly, apologies for keeping everybody waiting a little bit, but any discussion about taxis is complicated, as we all know. But we're really getting stuck in to this issue now and sorting out what is actually a really crucial public service in Greater Manchester, and needs a service that needs more attention. And indeed, as do the people who provide that service around our city region. And that's the spirit in which we open up this conversation today. I'm joined by Councillor Eamonn O'Brien, who has been our lead, particularly on the clean air issues as they relate to taxis in Greater Manchester. Also by Sarah Todd, Chief Executive of Trafford Council, but who is the Chief Executive lead for us as we look at this plan that we are bringing forward today to fix a broken system, because that's basically what it is. The system of taxi licensing across England is demonstrably a broken system, with reference to the graph that has just appeared in front of you. If you look at what that graph is telling you, it's telling you that over 10% of all taxi licenses in England are issued by one local authority. If you look at, I think, the next graph, I think there's a bar chart as well, it will tell you that in our city region, we are on the verge of not licensing the majority of our taxis. We're just about hanging on at this moment in time. But we are at the point where, if the growth continues that you just saw on the last graph, we will no longer be able to say we are licensing a majority of our taxis. And I'm not just saying this is a GM problem on our own. If you kind of speak to people across the country, this is a problem that affects lots of different areas. And it's not necessarily about criticising one local authority, although people will focus on that local authority that was on the screen. What this reflects is a broken system, where if it wasn't Wolverhampton, it would be somewhere else, because it would constantly be about going to the place where it may work at that particular moment in time for somebody to go. It all comes back to the Deregulation Act 2015, which opened the door to all of this. But then particularly the change that came about with relation to some of the apps and the way in which companies have operated has brought about a change now, which we can't accept, I'm afraid, anymore. And we can't accept it because we can't guarantee to our residents the standard of vehicles, the safety standards on our roads. You know, it may well be that those things are properly done, but unless we're doing it ourselves, then we don't know for sure. That's what we want to get back to, a position where we have local control of what I described before as a crucial public service. We need to talk about it in that way, a service that supports our residents day in, day out, who need to rely on taxis. And the figures show that many of our lower income residents are more dependent on taxis because they don't have access to a car. But of course, it's about supporting our economy, and particularly the visitor economy in here in Greater Manchester. And we want to ensure that the kind of status of our taxi trade is correctly positioned. I don't think we, if we're honest, and I'll include myself in this, I don't think we've talked about this enough. But now that I am starting to talk less about yellow buses, I am now going to talk more about taxis. You know, we have the capacity. The serious point is the capacity now, having re-regulated buses, to go on a similar journey with our taxi colleagues and get to a point where we can end up with a different system at the end of it. And we've got to acknowledge that it means change for us, because there are reasons why perhaps people have sought licenses out with our boundaries. It might be that we're not processing applications quickly enough, or there's the cost of those applications. So we recognise that some of this is about challenging ourselves, and I think Sarah will talk in a moment about some of the proposals we're putting forward today as to how we can improve what we do and how we're going to engage with our own taxi trade on those proposals. But whatever we do in Greater Manchester to improve what we do, Eamon will talk about some of the support we're providing for our trade right now. Whatever we do, it will always be at risk of being undercut by someone else's standards somewhere else in the country if we don't fix the issue of out of area working. And it's why today Greater Manchester is seeking to give this issue a national prominence. In our view, it hasn't been uh, given the right attention within Parliament, and we are asking MPs and the government as well to work with us now and give it the attention it needs to fix an issue which is causing significant challenges right across the country. There was a welcome commitment in the English devolution white paper to bring forward or consult on potential changes, particularly on a possibility of city regions taking more control over the granting of licenses, and that's a welcome departure. But to relate to you what I've just heard in the room opposite from our own taxi trade here in Greater Manchester, not another consultation and not another long delay to change, because change is needed right now. We recognise, with all of the challenges the trade has faced um, through um, through COVID and the clean air debate, cost of living pressures, these have been very challenging times to be a taxi driver in Greater Manchester, and we need to start moving quickly to shore up the trade, but also to help them improve the standards of what they do. And what I am saying today is that Greater Manchester will be launching a a campaign which we hope will go national, and we believe other areas will want to back us in this campaign. And the brand of that campaign you can see on the bottom of the screen there. We expect that to become a national campaign brand that other areas will want to get behind as we build a campaign for the earliest possible change in the law. It is to end the practice of out of area working that was enabled by that Deregulation Act in 2015. And like with the buses, deregulation doesn't necessarily mean to higher standards for the public, and we've seen the same in this regard. We need to reverse that. We need to go back to a position where we have GM licensed taxis operating in Greater Manchester. That's why we're calling on the government to support this change, and going back to in-area licensing, an end to out-of-area licensing and all the problems that presents, not least from a public safety point of view. Speaking as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Greater Manchester, it is essential from public safety point of view that GMP are able to have access to a licensing system that enables the higher standards of public safety. And GMP raised concerns with me about out of area licensing and their ability to pursue issues if there is an issue that needs to be looked into, or an incident or a collision that has happened. So this goes to the heart of having a safe taxi system for our residents. It's about one with local accountability. But we're also asking the government in the forthcoming spending review to look at issues that would also help our GM licensed trade. For instance, extending the VAT exemption to new wheelchair accessible taxis. And that's a call we're making today as part of the spending review, to extend the national plug-in taxi grant, and also to reduce the rate of VAT on public EV charging. So we're making those national calls alongside the critical step of ending out of area working, because anything else we do in Greater Manchester won't work in the long run unless it's on the solid foundation of the system license. So with that, I will pause, and I think Sarah will pick up the next part of this in relation to some of the changes that we believe um, uh, could be made here, but which we will now consult with on the local trade. Sarah.
Thank you. Uh, I guess, as the mayor said, clearly our campaign is centred around um, the legislation that is about dealing with out of area licensing. But what we also want to do, we don't want to wait for that. Clearly, that is absolutely critical. What we want to do is develop a local plan here now, so local action, to understand how we can get more of our taxi drivers to license here in Greater Manchester. As you heard, almost half now of our private hire vehicles licensed elsewhere. They're doing that for a reason. We need to understand what we need to do in Greater Manchester to be able to get more of our licensees, more of our people who live here, licensed elsewhere, licensing in Greater Manchester. And that is so critical to us being able to give that assurance around the trust and the confidence in that as a key part of our sector. So we are starting, and we've started it today in this building, an engagement exercise over a period of about 12 weeks, where we are engaging with all of our taxi trade, with drivers and with operators, and with councils as well as other stakeholders, including passengers, to help us understand the things that we need to do to remove barriers and to offer incentives for more of our drivers to be licensed here in Greater Manchester. So, as part of that process, we are going to have some independent research done that is going to involve surveys and interviews. We'll have an online survey. We will be interviewing taxi drivers as part of that process, and trade representatives and trade unions as well, to help us understand the things that we need to do in order to get this right. There's several different matters that we will be engaging on. It will be about understanding the existing taxi policies that are in operation and the things that we could do differently and better, and still maintain quality and safety, of course, in Greater Manchester. But we'll also be starting to look at the things that we can do at Greater Manchester level that will streamline and start to make things more effective for the trade, and look at what the options are for doing that. At the moment, all 10 councils have licensing responsibility, so we'll be considering that as part of this exercise. We're also going to be talking to the trade, and Councillor O'Brien will talk about this some more, about the support that's available to help them upgrade their vehicles to be emission compliant. That's a really important part of what we are intending to do. We have secured some funding from government, £8 million, which will be to support the Hackney trade to be able to upgrade their vehicles. So we're going to be consulting the trade on how we go about doing that. And equally, and we didn't get the funding, unfortunately, for the support of the private hire vehicles. So Greater Manchester is intending to put some resources together to provide some support for private hire vehicles to upgrade their vehicles so that they are compliant. And we'll be consulting as part of that 12-week exercise on engagement in that. The intention, absolutely, that we're in a place by summer to understand what we're going to do in terms of the Hackney trade, but with all of this coming together in a report that will come through the combined authority, in, with the intention that we engage with the trade at every single stage. So I don't know, hopefully that covers broadly what we're going to do. So I think I'm going to hand over to Brian.
Thank you, Sarah. So, as we've talked about previously, when it comes to clean air, we want to try and do the right thing in the right way. Just as we've managed to negotiate a clean air plan that doesn't charge anybody, but that delivers investment to clean up the air, we also want to take a reasonable and pragmatic approach to how our taxi fleet, both Hackney and private hire, can help contribute to that. So we're very pleased that we did manage to negotiate £8 million for a green Hackney fund. We want to consult them the best way of getting that money out as quickly as possible to the Hackney trade, to the Hackney fleets. So that's one of the key parts of this engagement. We want to try and do that as quickly as possible. At the same time, we also want to try and support our private hire vehicles to upgrade where possible. So looking at a range of different financial incentives and options there for them, but also to understand fundamentally that this is quite a restricted market in places. It can be quite a challenge to quite rapidly upgrade all of these. So we need a more flexible approach in terms of how local licensing arrangements can still achieve cleaner air by getting vehicles upgraded, but do so in a way that doesn't penalise unfairly or unnecessarily the trade itself. So collectively across the local authorities with other leaders, we are looking at how we move some of those compliance deadlines away from the end of this calendar year to the end of next calendar year, so that we still retain that commitment to upgrading vehicles and therefore helping contribute to cleaner air. But we give the trade a lot more time and scope and flexibility to actually make the shift itself and get those newer vehicles. At the same time, we recognise that there are some taxi drivers in Greater Manchester who will have made a pretty significant investment in their vehicle and would have done so and have been licensed on the basis that they would get possibly up to 15 years out of that vehicle. So in some cases, depending on the local licensing circumstances, there will also be the flexible option open to see that vehicle out until the end of that age policy. So it can be a little bit complex about exactly what that means. But I think fundamentally what we're trying to get to is a system that still retains that ambition to get as many clean vehicles out there on the streets as possible, beginning with that focus on hackneys in particular, but also has a reasonable and flexible approach in terms of supporting those who have already made commitments to their vehicles, not to have to upgrade too soon for them to perhaps, for it to make sense for their business. So we're trying to balance, we're still going back to that principle of trying to do the right thing, which is cleaning up the air, but doing it in the right way, which is about supporting people to make changes rather than penalising them unnecessarily. So from my perspective, this will help us still achieve the Clean Air Plan. It will still make us compliant. We are confident about that. This is not us walking away from that commitment at all. In fact, it's about how we go about delivering it as best as possible and as quickly as possible. But ultimately, we do want to make sure we're doing it with people in a supportive way rather than forcing them to change and potentially putting people out of business and doing down livelihoods. We want to support our taxi trade. We know how important it is. That's what this campaign is all about, recognizing how important it is in so many different ways to our residents. It's a vital part of that wider transport system we want. It can align with the ambitions of the B network very, very well if we maintain a commitment to a local licensed and trusted service for residents and for visitors to Greater Manchester. I'll hand back to Andy.
Thanks very much. So thanks, Eamonn. Thank you, Sarah. To summarise, we are doing what we can to support the trade now. So Eamonn's just touched on that flexibility around the compliance date. So we're proposing to put that back a year to give people more time to the end of 2026. There is also the money that is available for hackneys via the government. So we're looking at an option of whether we could give a grant of around £12,500 on a first come first served basis for hackney drivers to achieve compliance. Or is there a different way of spending that money that could be perhaps a better or fairer way of spending that money? So we're putting that question to the trade to advise us on. Though we didn't secure any money from the government, we have found Greater Manchester resources to support our private hire trade as well. And the initial proposal is we are offering either a grant of £1,000 or an interest-free loan of £5,000 to support people operating in GM licensed private hire vehicles to modernise and improve and to support people operating in the trade. The point here is that the private hire trade is largely compliant with clean air obligations. but we still think it's right, given the pressures that the trade has faced, to support them, given the challenge that they've faced, and quite frankly, the blight that was caused by the prolonged clean air debate. We still think it's right to do that. Sarah touched on the point that we've got to do about challenging ourselves. It's not about criticising one local authority today. Let me stress that again. It's the system that's broken, and that's what needs fixing. But in that interim, we recognise that we should challenge ourselves, because sometimes it can take too long for people to get a licence, or the cost is, there's a differential there, and we recognise we've got to sharpen the incentives for people to license here. And are there things with relation to the airport that might give them that incentive to license here? Is there some infrastructure change that we need to put in place as well? So we recognise we need to change the way we run our own system, and that's what we're going to look in detail at over the coming weeks with the trade, looking at a range of options. But a greater GM role, I would suggest, in terms of kind of finding those efficiencies, making things quicker, is one of the very strong options on the table as part of this. And then to finish on that final point, we could do all of that, but we'd still be at risk of being undercut if we don't change the law. We need a law that supports us to have a local licensed, trusted taxi trade in Greater Manchester, and at the moment we don't have that. So everything we do could be at risk of being undermined by the whole out of area working operation, which in my view does operate against public safety. Local licensing is there for a reason. It's so that local councils and councillors can make sure that they do that important job of licensing vehicles with the interests of the safety of the public in mind, and drivers, so that then they can make sure that people operating in our communities, that they can be accountable to communities for ensuring the safety of those vehicles. And we've got to get back to that basic principle of a taxi trade that has that trust across the board. But as all Eamonn and Sarah said, and everyone in the room said, we recognise that the vast majority of our trade is out there doing its best in difficult circumstances, and the truth is it's been too difficult, and the time has come for us to go on a journey with the taxi trade in the same way as the buses that you can see passing us outside. And the reason why people can have confidence in what we're saying today is GM has made the arguments in the past on transport, and we have won those arguments, and we've delivered on time and on budget. And the commitment I've given to colleagues in the other room today is we will do the same here. We will make our argument in the right way. I believe we will win our argument for change, and then we will bring that change through with people rather than doing to people, and get to a position where we have a world-class transport system in Greater Manchester in every respect. And that's where we all want to get to. We are a city region that's raising our game across the board in terms of what we do, improving the experience for people who come to our city region. This is the next chapter of that change, and it involves working with our taxi trade to get things right. So we're really grateful for your attendance today. We know these issues matter hugely to many people across Greater Manchester. We're not saying today that the proposals we've put before you are, the be all and end all, and the issue solved. We're not saying that. We're saying we're ready now to take those out as a starter to engage responses from the industry. But I have to say, we were encouraged by some of the strong endorsement we received in the room today for the approach we're taking, and the way in which we're building this with people. So thank you everyone for your patience as well. We are open to questions in this format. If anybody would like to ask any, I can read your mind, Kevin, and I know there's probably a wish to get your one-to-ones away. Is that if that's the only thing we do have is people watching online, and I don't know whether there's any questions from trade representatives who are with us still that think need to be addressed. We'll take one question, and then we will go into your one-to-ones.
Thank you, Andy. Talking about the licensing issue here in Manchester, last year the knowledge test was abolished, and that was abolished here in Manchester because I did my knowledge test in the 80s here, Hendrickton. and we had a multi-choice here from last 20 odd years. So it's easier for hackney carriage and private hire to pass the knowledge test for the taxi, hackney carriage and private hire. Now it's been abolished. It's only a simple basic test. So those people who have come out of Manchester plating or getting licensed in Wolverhampton or Sefton or anywhere else, they can come back to Manchester. That is one of the reasons, because I was in the meeting with Danielle, licensing liaise meeting, and also Berry did the same, Oldham's done the same, and Greater Manchester Cross, they've done the same. They've abolished the test, make it easier for people to license here in Manchester, Greater Manchester. And I speak to drivers all the time, sir, because I work at Private Hire Taxi Monthly, whichever magazine comes out to every license department. And so we always telling the drivers, please, you can pass your test here in Manchester. You don't need to go to Wolverhampton or anywhere else. Come back to Manchester.
Exactly. I mean, that's what we want, because Sarah made this point very well before. If you go back to the graphs that were on the screen earlier, I don't know if a colleague could show us those graphs at the start. What does that graph mean in terms of both what we're doing, but also in terms of what it generates for Greater Manchester? What it says to you is, these are drivers, as I say, they're all working here, but the money is not circulating back into our own system with relation to processing licenses. The cost at which we can make those licenses available to people. And the problem with the broken system we have is it traps one area in a sort of virtuous circle, and it traps other areas in what you might call a vicious circle. Because for the areas that are kind of starting to do well, more success leads to more success, because more people go for licenses, more money comes in. And as you'll know, councils have to spend the money generated through licensing within that same area of the council's work. So it kind of creates a sort of virtuous circle where more and more comes back in, the service gets even better. And in the areas that are on the other side of it, it creates a vicious circle where more people leave, there's less money in the council systems, there's less you can do to halt the change, and therefore the councils have to change some of how they test, and the knowledge test, you could see as part of that. So that really is the issue. We've got to get the kind of money that's going out of area back into our area so that we can provide the best possible service we can to our own residents that are, in an ideal world, would want to register here. And we know the vast majority of taxi drivers in Greater Manchester who work here would prefer to be licensed here and have that relationship with us and with the local community. We're just fighting against a broken system. That's the big message today. This system of taxi licensing in England is no longer fit. Never was, you might say, when it went to the deregulated model, and that's what we're here to change. I don't know if. Well, we appreciate that support, and we're grateful for the support in the room today, and we're going to work with you to get it right. But thank you, and thanks for coming today. Colleagues, with that then, I think if there were no other indications, I'll pause this part of the press conference there, and we will be available now for your one-to-one interviews. Thank you, everyone.